Here's a bit of an understatement for you. Popular music today has become boring. I've talked in other videos about how the chords that most professional songwriters are using for music today in the charts are the simplest and most basic they've been for over 80 years. In mainstream popular music, we keep losing levels of musical complexity, and chords that were once common are being abandoned in favour of more and more simplicity. But this problem, this constant dumbing down of music, isn't just about the chords. In this video, I want to talk about something else that we keep losing from music today, and that is something called musical expression. Musical expression is a kind of umbrella term that means putting a bit of personality and soul into whatever piece you are performing, instead of hitting every single note the same as if it were being played by a robot. It means that when you actually perform the song, you vary different elements within the song to create emotional depth. And when it's done right, turning up the expression dial on a song can have incredible effects. There's a 2007 film called Across the Universe, which is basically a story being told through Beatles songs. And in that movie and on the soundtrack, there is a performance of the song Let It Be, in which gospel singer Carol Woods performs the song with so much passion and musical expression that the first time I heard it, it literally moved me to tears. I'd heard and performed the Beatles version a million times, but that version of the song with the musical expression dial turned all the way up was the most emotionally powerful version I had ever heard. So, if emotional depth is created when you add expression to a performance, what happens when you start systematically removing it? You get what we mostly have today: garbage, throwaway junk music with no heart, no soul, and no life in it. In modern music today, there are only a few forms of musical expression that are still allowed. Thankfully, you do still get variations and expression in the world of volume and dynamics. You also get it in either the restraint or the passion with which the singer is performing. But today, many other forms of musical expression have been lost to this, the grid. So today, I'm going to start by just briefly talking about two of the fairly well-known forms of musical expression we have lost. But then I'm going to look at a third one that most people don't know about. And to explain and illustrate it, I'm going to centre in on legendary Delta bluesman Robert Johnson, and just one of the many forms of musical expression he used that has been all but forgotten today. So the first lost form of musical expression I want to look at quickly is variations in tempo. And when I say variations in tempo, I don't mean a drummer who can't play to a click.
I like to play.
It's more along the lines of a drummer who can play perfectly to a click, who could play perfectly without the click even in his ear, who then chooses to stretch or compress time to create emotional depth. A drummer who chooses to add power to a song by speeding up and slowing down very subtly, all for musical effect. Playing around with the tempo in this way has historically always been a form of musical expression. Sadly, however, for at least the past 30 years, this has been a massive no-no in the world of rock and pop. Today, everyone records with a click, but in the 60s, in the era of the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Kinks, almost nobody did. In Zeppelin, John Bonham didn't use one on When the Levee Breaks. And I wonder if that is actually one part of why so much music from that era is widely reckoned to be better than anything being released today. They had multiple levels of musical expression available to them that their listeners were used to hearing, that aren't available today, that most listeners today have been conditioned not to expect. Fast forward to the early 90s, and digital audio workstations were starting to appear. Almost everyone was now recording to a click. And by the noughties, they weren't just recording to a click, they were now being digitally locked to the grid created by the computer. For those who don't know, that means that after recording, every drum hit, every guitar strum is moved on a computer to line up perfectly with the robotic timing of the digital metronome. And so, when that became commonplace, yet another form of musical expression was lost. And if anyone's interested in hearing that being demonstrated, I'm going to give you two quite extreme examples. You can start out by listening to something like I Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas. If you'd like to hear a song that has been utterly quantized to death, that has had every ounce of soul and human element squeezed out of it by a computer, leaving nothing behind but the audio equivalent of a Pop-Tart. On the other end of the scale, however, one place that still uses variations in tempo as a form of musical expression is actually choral music, where they don't have a click, they don't have quantization, instead they have a conductor. And that human conductor sets the flow and the pace of the rhythm. And if you would now like to hear this push and pull in tempo at its expressive, emotive best, go listen to Sing Me to Heaven by the University of Utah Singers. It is, of course, a completely different style, a completely different genre, but it is nonetheless bursting with soul. It's so full of emotion and passion. That is a recording that contains almost all the musical expression elements that modern music seems to lack. And that recording I mentioned is on Spotify. Just try to click your fingers along to that song. The tempo ebbs and flows like magic. The conductor is a wizard with a wand, and that extra layer of expression works alongside the words and the music to make the song phenomenally moving. If I Got a Feeling is a musical Pop-Tart, this is sitting down to a feast with Mozart. On now, very briefly, to the second lost form of musical expression, variations in pitch, or tuning. Most serious music fans are also aware of another huge loss to musical expression that coincided with the digital age. The scourge on music that is autotune. Of course, some really magnificent singers like Adele don't use it, but they are, sadly, in the minority. These days, it's not just the beat that gets locked to a digital grid, it's also the notes. A great example of this is a Michael Bublé song called Home. His vocal take on this song, in my opinion, is fantastic. It's incredibly expressive, it's full of variations in dynamics and tone. But for me, it is a bit marred by how heavily the autotune has been applied to his vocal take. Contrast that to something like Mojo Pin or Grace by Jeff Buckley, where he's literally singing quarter notes and eighth notes in a way that gives you goosebumps. Notes in between the notes, notes that you can't really get to on the grid. And you realise once again that by superimposing that digital grid, by forcing every note to align with the notes on a keyboard, we have lost another form of musical expression. It's counterintuitive and it sounds like a strange thing to say, but a song that is actually not perfectly in tune is far more emotive and moving than one that has been digitally forced into that grid. Another fantastic example of this is Dancing Days by Led Zeppelin. If you listen closely to Robert Plant's vocal take on that track, you realise that he's almost never bang on the note. And yet, somehow, that vocal take remains pretty much perfect. But today, I actually want to turn the clock back a little bit further than the 60s and 70s, to dig out and examine a different form of musical expression which we have all but lost today. I want to roll it back to the 1930s, to Mississippi, where the Delta Blues was being played by a young black American musician called Robert Johnson. The man who was the biggest inspiration behind my favourite guitarist of all time, Eric Clapton, in his days with the Bluesbreakers and Cream. Robert Johnson was a blues master who had incredible technique on the acoustic guitar. He had a way of playing it that made it sound like there was two guitarists and sometimes three guitarists all playing simultaneously when it was in fact just him. And he took full advantage of the two forms of musical expression we've already looked at. He used timing as a form of expression, speeding up and slowing down as if he had his own internal conductor rather than a click. And of course, he freely used changes in pitch as a form of expression because in the 1930s there were no computers and therefore no autotune. But he also did something else, a third lost form of musical expression. Because even back then there was a grid that you could be locked into, even before computers and digital quantization existed. And it was this, the backbone of the blues, a formation of chords called the 12-bar blues. For those of you who aren't familiar with the theory behind blues, this is how it works. Mostly the chords follow a simple order which you can represent with numbers or letters, depending on which key you're in. Here you can see a very simple version of the 12-bar blues which tells you what the chords would be in the key of A. Blues performers would change the pattern sometimes, they might add chords in, they might take chords out, but by and large this version was the basic blueprint of the blues that almost all bluesmen used. And this was the grid that Robert Johnson chose to stretch and condense and expand and contract in really unexpected ways. Of course, most blues is actually not just a regular A, D or E, they tend to be dominant 7th chords, but just to keep things simple and uncluttered for the sake of this video, I'm just showing basic letter names today. Before we dive into his technique, however, I want to point out that Robert Johnson could perfectly play the 12-bar blues and did so many times. In his short lifetime, he made a total of 42 recordings, and many of these were fixed, rigid 12-bar blues compositions that stuck to that basic outline without ever deviating. Good examples include Sweet Home Chicago, When You've Got a Good Friend, Take 2, Walking Blues, I'm a Steady Rolling Man, Little Queen of Spades, Me and the Devil Blues, Stop Breaking Down Blues, Love in Vain, and Milk Cow's Calf Blues. So Robert Johnson could, and frequently did, play the 12-bar blues perfectly without error. On screen now you can see the rigid chord structure of his classic tune Sweet Home Chicago. In his music, Robert Johnson liked to use these signature blues turnarounds to open and close a song. I've left these off just for illustration's sake. And with those short blues turnarounds removed, you can see the structure of that song. Every verse is exactly the same length, Johnson sticks to the grid, no changes at all. But now it's time to take a look at that third lost form of musical expression, variations and improvisations in meter. Robert Johnson could play that standard 12-bar blues perfectly and did so many times. But in a wide selection of other songs that he recorded, he started to break out of that grid and play in more expressive ways. For example, he would add beats to bars or subtract them. The rhythm of a song, the amount of beats in a bar and the amount of bars in a line is something called meter. And it was this that Robert Johnson chose to vary. It was this that he chose as an unusual and now almost forgotten form of musical expression. We'll start out with a very simple illustration. Here is the chord layout for his song Malted Milk. And you can see from this structure that it's clearly planned. He does a little improvised extension in the same place on every single verse. It's at the end of line 2. And the fact that these extensions happen in the same place on every verse show it's not accidental, it's intentional, it's planned. So this is the intro. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So first line, completely normal. Here's the second line. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there you can see in verse 1, he's just tagged an extra 2 beats on the end of that line. On to verse 2 now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's line 1. Line 2 now with the extension. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just a very basic introduction to using meter as a form of musical expression, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's a song with a clear pattern where you can see he's extending the beats on the second line. Now let's look at a song where he constantly removes a beat. This is Terraplane Blues. And in this one, once again, we get a theme, a sense of uniformity, but it's definitely getting more complex. The main variation he does in this song is to constantly convert bars of 4 beats into bars of 3. On screen now you can see the full layout. We've got 7 verses and every single one of them contains these converted bars, and not one of them is the same as any of the others. And I also think it's possible he did this intentionally because the rhythm of the song seems to kind of line up with the lyrics. The lyrics talk about a car with a short circuit and a problem with the batteries. Of course, it's a blues song, it's full of double entendres, but on the surface, he's talking about a car that needs a battery recharge. And so, the repeated random inclusion of 3-beat bars throughout this song might have been an audio illustration of this idea of a vintage car that just can't get its engine turning over properly. So, let's have a listen to verse 1 of Terraplane Blues. The first line is just standard. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slight change in groove there. Second line, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and so on. On now to verse 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to look at 2 more examples of this from Robert Johnson, and each one is going to get a little bit crazier in this form of expression using meter as a variation. So, in Terraplane Blues, we saw Robert introducing changes in time signature and multiple bars with dropped beats. In the next song, probably his most famous one, we're going to see him altering the meter even further, by not just adjusting the amount of beats in a bar, but also adjusting the amount of bars there is on a line. Thus far, we've just seen beats added, beats removed, or the occasional extra bar. At this point, we're going to see the whole 12-bar blues structure more or less thrown out. This is probably his best known song, and it's one that is tied in very closely to his legend. This is Crossroad Blues, take 1. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. That's the first line. Second line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And this is 5 bars. We had a 6-bar first line and a 5-bar second line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now on to verse 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was the first line again. 6 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. This time the second bar isn't 5, it's just 4. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just look at how he's constantly varying the length of each line in the song. Here we see him adding extra bars and including bars of 3 and 6 beats in amongst the regular bars of 4. And once again, not one single verse is the same as another. There is literally not one single stanza in this entire song that matches any of its neighbours when it comes to the variations he's chosen to include. But now, finally, let's look at what many people, myself included, consider his greatest song, Hellhound on My Trail. This is probably his most complex moment. And here, once again, we have every verse with different varied timings to each other. We have extended bars, shortened bars, extended numbers of bars in each line, and shortened numbers of bars in each line. The basic theoretical skeleton underlying Hellhound on My Trail is not actually a 12-bar blues, it's a 15-bar blues, 5 bars on every line. But Robert Johnson throws in constant variations, extra beats or altered meter all throughout. And he never repeats himself once, yet again. Every verse is different. So here we go, verse 1. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's verse 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This particular form of freedom of musical expression is something that pretty much doesn't seem to exist in music almost anywhere anymore. But just look at how Robert Johnson was not confined by one of the oldest grids of all. He constantly chooses not to confine himself to just 4 bars a line, and he also constantly chooses not to confine himself to 4 beats in every bar. Of course, it's not because he can't play within the grid, he does so many times. He changes it up because he chooses to. One of the very few places where you can still find that level of musical creativity in meter is actually prog rock. So you could actually say that Robert Johnson was the prog blues master. But now, of course, I have to ask the inevitable question, how on earth could anyone possibly apply this form of musical expression to a band? Isn't this kind of free time, free-flowing form of expression pretty much confined to a solo performer or a duet? Well, there are actually various options. You could demo the song and then chart out what you did with the various dropped beats or extended bars and learn that as a band. That's probably the prog approach. Simon and Garfunkel do a kind of slightly toned down version of this to a lesser degree in many of their classic songs where they extend bars or reduce them or extend lines or reduce them. You could go into the studio, record the take you want, the kind of soulful, expressive version of the song with the different timings, and then you could use that as your guide track, bring the rest of the band in, have them learn it in that form, and get the backing musicians on. That would be a really fascinating musical experiment. But perhaps I'm just being ridiculous by saying that maybe this is something that's meant to be just for solo performers. I don't have all the answers. But I do know that this is another form of musical expression along with variations in tempo and variations in pitch that is getting lost and forgotten. Even if our options are limited when it comes to applying them today, one way or another, we desperately need to get these lost forms of musical expression back. If you haven't yet properly listened to Robert Johnson's stuff, go check it out, it's on Spotify. It is a raw, challenging listen compared to what most pop music sounds like today, but that is the sound of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, blues masters to have ever lived. So if you're a bit of a music nerd like myself, if you haven't yet given it your attention, you are missing out. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll see you next time.